13th of January 2022. Welcome, everybody. Dana Durnford, I hope you're doing well. This is the last show of the week. Unless, of course, there's breaking news. And just get right into it. We're going to cover a recap of 2021 species die-offs. And this is probably going to be a 3-part video. I meant to put part 1 up there for everyone. And you don't need to see part 1 and 2 to understand part 3, because we provide the documentation as we're talking, so everybody can pick it up as you're going. So 2021, there was millions and millions and millions of birds had died of starvation, emaciated. Smaller birds, insect eaters, majority of them. There's 190 species. We'll get to that just next 3 videos. Try to build an image for everybody to reinforce it and to make the narrative strong in case you're into a debate. Fukushima has humanity on the brink of a possible worldwide nuclear holocaust. The world as we know it has changed. A celebrated physician, Fukushima has humanity. So this is a radioactive fallout model of Fukushima, just a 20-day model. If you let the model run for another 10 days, the rest of the planet would have disappeared in a continuous plume. A continuous plume that pulses energy every second at 186,000 miles a second. And it can do that for millions and millions of years. And there's nothing on the planet that has an autoimmune defense trigger for it. And so your body attacks it with white blood cells for the rest of your life. And insects and birds, mammals and animals and all the other species also have those same attributes. And what happens is you displace the red blood cells and they carry oxygen nutrition. And so now your body, the more bioaccumulate into your body, like for insects or animals or mammals or birds or humans, the more you bioaccumulate, the less oxygen you have in your body. And there's a whole lot of issues when that happens. The biggest one, of course, is your immune system is overloaded and you're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses and diseases and illnesses than you would have been if you had a normal immune system. That's true for all the species. So you see many weird die-offs where the immune systems were obviously compromised. You can kind of put the dots together. Animals starving as the food chain continued to collapse. Mass starvation events plagued the West Coast. So many different species showing up emaciated. The gray whales, there's 70 gray whales in this story have died from starvation, not from ship strikes or entanglement. That narrative is slowly built over the last couple of years as the cover story, same as coronavirus is actually the cover story for radioactive fallout. Columbia medical professor inhaling just one hot particle can cause a cancer or heart problems or liver problems or lung or respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, and up to 1,800 illnesses before cancer is manifested. So it's not just cancer, but just a single atom has those attributes. I'm trying to build you a story before we jump into the seemingly endless amount of headlines we got to cover. This won't take long. Worst case scenario was abandoning Tokyo forever. Imagine having to abandon New York because Indian Point had an accident. Or abandoning Vancouver, Canada, or Ottawa, Canada, because Pickering or Darlington had an accident. Because these are real-life scenarios. Just ask the people from Pepper yet. Concern rising as Fukushima plants 16,000 workers have quit. So you're abandoning Tokyo, which by the way is 36 million people, which is what they were supposed to do. and they will eventually abandon Japan because of Fukushima. 16,000 workers have quit severe working conditions. To work at the Fukushima is equivalent to be given an order to die, says radiation experts, which means nuclear scientists, nuclear academics, nuclear alumni, nuclear students, nuclear corporations are not going to be hanging out around that place ever, under any circumstances. Japan Times columns, as the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time. So you can't get everybody sick on the planet without all the species getting sick too, per se. And sick being up to 1,800 illnesses from radiation exposures. And so another point to think about with this was that global radioactive fallout from weapons testing had changed the sex ratio of all humans worldwide. So there was more males than females, which is less population, right? But you can't do that without affecting all the birds and animals and mammals and insects and everything else. Just something to think about for everybody. And so if your coal plant, oil plant, or gas plant breaks down, you're not going to hear deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. But if your nuclear power plant breaks down, deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. And it does that by the radioactive fallout. Okay, we're starting to get there. Here we go. So this picture was taken about 100 miles from where I'm to in 2021. This is an eagle on top of a whale fin frozen into the ice down by Musgrave Harbour. Everything was frozen over. That's an incredible picture, is it not? We get the full picture comes up a little later on. It's dead whales, dead ocean. So this model was from a German institute.
May be worse than thought. Studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years. Kim Min-ji reports.
This graphic shows the gradual contamination of the Pacific Ocean due to leaks of radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. The simulation, which was run by a German marine research institute, shows the entire Pacific waters being polluted by radioactive water in just 6 years.
May be worse than thought.
So just 6 years. That video there was from about 6 hours ago. It was just before dark, and I was trying to get the drone. I had tracking, but what I didn't realize was that, was that with some drones, your batteries get cold, they'll just quit mid-flight. Or it'll give you a warning, it's going to land. It won't let you land somewhere else. Wherever it's to, it's going to go land. And that's what happened with me. I was trying to get it to work. Now, we were out today looking for birds again, or insects. I'm just going to move that ahead for you. Yeah, because I was expecting to get the drone to track, and everything was looking good. I'm just going to move it fast ahead. And so I was lining it up because there's a lot of trees there, and I want to go between the trees. And then it done that, and it was trying to land on its own. I didn't realize what was going on, and then I realized it needed to land, and it didn't care about me. And I was able to steer it behind me, and finally it landed anyway, blah, blah, blah. And so we're out looking for birds. I did find 3 birds today, that was pretty amazing. That was pretty amazing. Give me 1 second. Here we go. I found 2 birds on the very end of it. You see them up in the tree there? There's one. That was amazing. How pathetic is that? There's another one that will show up in a second. It's the 13th of January. So we only seen about 7, 8 birds since November total. So to see 3 in one day was extraordinary. Wow. And there's the second one a little lower on the other side of the tree. 7 birds total that I found on these research expeditions. I'm going to end the video there and post it up to Instagram when I get home. Pretty cool. Still haven't done. Sue me. Let's get rolling. So we got 21 votes. Is thousands of emaciated whales, birds, cougars, bears, etc. caused by Fukushima radioactive fallout? Hang on there. Okay, all right. Let's get it back. Let's hit it hard. Here we go. Rock and roll. Whales won't stop killing themselves in New Zealand. Now that one was 2019, but I like to use it as an example because you got to look at the big picture, not just 1 year, right? And there was many different die-off species, and people, you know, Danish pilot whales, they're suicidal. Yeah, since Fukushima, they've been suicidal. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. You had mass whale species dying off of all species, not just pilot whales. You had mortality events for all kinds of species. I'll show you some of that right away. New Zealand experienced its largest whale die-off, 600 pilot whales. These are extraordinary events in just a 10-year period. If you look back throughout history, you won't see it. The entire history comes close to it. Cesium remains dispersed throughout the water column from the surface to the ocean floor. That's 2012, May 2000, almost June 2012. So the whole ocean was completely contaminated already. Of course, the radioactive fallout, and you'll see many examples of that. The radioactive fallout covered the whole planet in just 16 days. At the end of 40 days, it was a uniform plume that is moving, but it covers the whole planet and it continues. So some spots are heavier than other spots, but there's no such thing as a good spot. Radioactive sea spray is also shown to blow hundreds of kilometers inland, and it ends up blowing into community. People get exceptional doses, but so will the animals and the insects and the birds and etc., etc. And this will go on for tens of thousands of years. So the plume travels very quick. There's many different plume models of different isotopes. It wasn't. So you have, it's not just pilot whales is what I'm trying to say also. It's all species, but minke whale, unusual mortality event. Gray whale, unusual mortality event. Humpback whales, unusual mortality event. North Atlantic right whale, unusual mortality event. Endangered killer whales, mortality event. Starving to death, which is what happens if you get enough radiation in your body. You can't uptake nutrition anymore because your body's saturated with red blood or white blood cells, which is true for animals too. See? Another adult southern resident. So emaciated animals are really significant. And it's also from starvation, don't get me wrong. Another adult southern resident killer whale and her calf found they were emaciated. Like the peanut head. So significant loss of fat and blubber. Because the whales we're seeing are going from 12 inches of blubber to 3 inches, and then they die. Also unusual mortality events for krill and mussels. And we done the research expeditions. I'll show you a little few pictures coming up. Fukushima fire spiked a year after 3/11. Try wrapping your mind around that. Fears that marine life is being poisoned by nuclear material flown from Fukushima. Marine life, experts warn of festering radioactive source contaminating the food chain. And you can see why anytime you're ready to do that. Once we kick in that gear, this thing will go pretty smooth. Alaska seabird die-off continues for another summer. Well, this was actually 6 years in a row. And you're talking millions of common murres washing up. And Cassini auklets in particular. And there was many other species. Seabirds have been found emaciated and starving. Fork-tailed storm petrels, fulmars, shearwaters, kittiwaks, auklets, Cassini auklets, puffins. And then a lot of grizzly bears were showing up emaciated, and the industry is trying to blame it on salmon. But 95 or more of the bear's diet is actually berries and grass and roots and grubs and stuff like that. So in British Columbia, they expected 5 million sockeye salmon, only 6 million returned, so they blamed the emaciated bears on the salmon. But it doesn't actually work that way, because bears will just eat berries and roots and grubs and even grass, right? Mysterious mass deaths of Alaskan birds baffle scientists. They're all emaciated, washed up, tens of thousands of dead birds. All of the species known as the common murres, which they can dive 600 feet, and well, not can, but do all day long. And they feed on anchovies and squid and sardines, krill, small species, right? Herring even. All appear to have starved to death. And of course, a bird can cover a long distance, right? But they do have a staple food that they normally migrate with. So if the food chain is broken, then that's what you expect to see happening. Now tonight we're not trying to read all the stories. We're just doing a recap, and so just the stories that tell us the stories basically, because we can't cover everything, obviously. Biologists who have examined the birds say they appear emaciated. 10 sperm whales die after stranding on Yorkshire coast. So they like to tell you that the pilot whales are the only species out there that follows each other up on the beaches, right? Which is simply not true. I'm from the land of pilot whales, by the way, and we've never seen these mass events until after Fukushima. And we see them each year, ever since I was a child. As long as back as I can remember, you can count on it in October for the pilot whales, or in November for the pilot whales to show up the first week of November. And every kid knows that here in Newfoundland. 10 sperm whales die after stranding. So you had the gray whales and humpback whales and minke whales and fin mortality events for all kinds of species, because they're all washing up on the beaches at the same time, the same as all the other species. So what I done was, you can't trust the system, right? So I launched research expeditions from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska for 4 to 5 months a year to go out and count the species, because I'm stupid like that. Done a lot of that, trust me, my God. I done a lot of that.
We're leaving Port Hardy. Goodbye, Port Hardy.
Goodbye, Port Hardy.
So we're going for no man's land now. We'll go out.
And And no man's land is no man's land, baby. Took 6 weeks to get to Alaska. Now, this was the crossing. I had to use the engine also to make sure I got across.
It's Monday.
That was the next morning. Fog. The whole story was a nightmare. The whole story is a nightmare. Let me give you some GPS.
Anchorage in the middle of nowhere.
Just to give you some context, right, of the research. We covered the whole coastline year after year. That was the operation. And just so you can get a handle on who I am. And I'm the stupid guy who's stupid enough to go up there and get the shit kicked out of him every day. That was the operation, right?
Well, we got the big one up.
Anyway, so you go up there and what did you discover, Dana? Well, you can fill the beach up with people and you're not going to find the species to the left. They're permanently exterminated. That's up by Alaska, these pictures, not very far from Alaska. And those pictures are from a famous spot in Haida, formerly known as the Queen Charlotte Islands. But the whole coastline would be those species. 7,000 plus species, highly visible species to your left, are missing. And we don't think they were kidnapped. We think that Fukushima exterminated them. Thanks a lot, Fukushima, buddy. So after years of diving that coastline, for instance, now to go up and see it stripped, and I mean stripped, and have a total denial from the Canadian government, total denial that the species were gone. I was under siege for many, many years from the nuclear industry. They had several hundred trolls attacking me on the internet in every direction imaginable. Now there's just a couple. It was really shocking. So this is another plume model of the xenon. You can see it just covered the Pacific, North America, now the Atlantic. Now it's getting ready to cover Europe. It doesn't stop just because the model stopped. The plume doesn't stop. So eventually covers the whole planet. So all the species to the left are actually missing. And we were warned, deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. Gee, I wonder how that works. Well, you can see to the left what it should look like, and to the right is actually the same place. They're before and after pictures, authentic pictures. We did find some. They came down and landed right alongside of me. Beautiful.
Hey, Zoe. A little too rough out there. And a few waves right here. I don't want to stay around here very long.
That was a miserable day. So was this actually. I washed up on the rocks 3 o'clock in the morning that night in a hurricane. It done thousands and thousands of dollars worth of damage. I couldn't get a forecast where I was to. And I woke up and then I spent the rest of the night till daylight fighting to survive. Okay, so here we go. Nearly 600 manatees die in Florida's waters in 2020. These are extraordinary events. They were emaciated. Their main food supply was killed off. Wisconsin pharmacists, that's not supposed to be there. Sorry. Another dead sperm whale washes up on Norfolk's coast. Another dead sperm whale. And it claims it got lost. These are idiots, the people that write that stuff. They're actually idiots. You can see it's emaciated. And 10 more on the east, your short coast washed up. There was a number of other beachings of sperm whales. According to them, all these whales got lost and washed up on the beaches in the United Kingdom. It's an emaciated whale, and I mean it's emaciated. It was alive when it came ashore, by the way. 10 sperm whales die after stranding. They were all emaciated too, by the way. I don't know. I was certainly looking for food. You know, we were hitting them. We were aggregating all these stories. I remember a couple of years ago, and there was a lot going on, and we might be doing 2 of these shows every month of die-offs. And I start getting stories where the whales were not emaciated, and the whales looked like they had eaten recently because they had food in their stomachs and stuff like that. One of the first paragraphs would be, the whales are not emaciated, because the nuclear industry, right, controls your media. And that's the first thing. Rarely seen off the coastline were in poor nutritional condition. Let's face it, United Kingdom media are just gross. They're gross. Emaciated grizzlies found dead on the central BC coast. Again, they point their fingers at salmon, but 96% of the bear's diet is berries and grubs and roots and stuff like that. And I mean, that's emaciated. So what happens is they get so much radiation in their body, they have leukemia. Right? They can't produce any more red blood cells. Their body's saturated with red blood cells attacking the radiation. That's what they call leukemia. And there was 5 other bears who seemed thinner than normal. I don't know about you. Is that thinner than normal to you, or is that my just being a weirdo? Do you know, it looks pretty normal to me. Yeah, I know. I hear you. Think about nuclear power in general. They're always hemorrhaging radiation. Worrisome spike in deadly birth defects around U.S. nuclear sites. Officials claim it could be a complete coincidence. You know, there was cancer clusters down by a nuclear meltdown in the United Kingdom, and they try to blame it on the common flu. Mountain lion captured in apartment complex. Animal looked to be in poor health. It was actually emaciated. And we got a lot of those stories in the last couple of years, don't we? Of different emaciated cougars. Because, look, I'm in the woods all day today, and let me tell you something. When I shot that drone video, it was almost dark. It was so cold. And my gloves are, I got to get new gloves. And solve that problem. And I got to get a water bottle for my drone batteries. That should probably solve it, right? Or I got to get something that can keep the batteries warm. Because you can't have the drone falling out of the sky like today. Drones falling out of the sky, bad. If that had been a bit farther away from me, there was no way it would have got back to me, right, before it came out of the sky. Locals save orca whale and returned it to the sea, where it swam back somewhere else and died. The bikini atoll, and so Fukushima is horrifying what Fukushima got done to the planet, right? I mean, this is horrifying stuff. This is models of plutonium radioactive fallout covering the planet based on TEPCO's numbers. So if you actually use the real numbers, it just terrify you. So here's another story, 2019 study. And what this shows, radioactive fallout from the testing program contaminated a huge swath of land and ocean, extending over 1 million square kilometers, and severely impacted the habitability of the affected atolls. 1 million square kilometers is still radioactive in 2019, where you shouldn't be living there. It's madness. Help the Orca was found lying on his side. There could be 10 kids dying on the side of the road, and Orca washes up. All the rescuers will head over towards the Orca. In what is believed to have been the first successful mission of its kind in the United Kingdom. United Kingdom, all the whales that wash up are owned by the Queen, right? The rescue was an extremely rare occurrence, with the stranded orca being an unusual sight. And they said it believed the first successful refloat. Yeah, because it's not normal, right? They don't have any practice pre-Fukushima. And it was over 5,000 since Fukushima, and which is 10% of what would have died. Over 5,000 whales and porpoises and dolphins, which at one point there was over 1,000 covert beak whales that showed up in a 2 or 3 month period, kept washing up. In order for that to happen, there's at least 10,000 of these whales would have died. And they were emaciated. It's believed the animal's young male was around 3.4 meters in length. Guessing it, so it should have been with his mom, right? Because the parrot will carry that baby around on their nose for 2 weeks, you know, if the baby dies. It rolled a couple times, then submerged and continued straight out away from the beach without looking back. These are very, very, very incredibly social animals, the killer whales. Certainly its good condition indicates the animal has been feeding recently and should be able to survive. So why would you make a statement like that? The animal had been feeding recently. Because it doesn't look very healthy to me. The nuclear leaks poisoned the Pacific. So a leak is not going to poison the Pacific, but a hemorrhaging nuclear meltdown will. And we're talking about the Pacific Ocean, which is that fella right there. And that's a model, as I showed you earlier, of the German institute that made the model. We're talking about the Pacific Ocean. Criticism will be worldwide, and rightfully so. Killer whales spotted off the British coast. Yay, the whales are coming. They frequently visit Shetland and seem to be coming here a lot more often now. A huge 11-foot... See, 11-foot orca is not huge, by the way. That's what I mean. The British media is just bizarre. It's truly like some kind of macabre circus whenever you read their articles. Right? And then they'll put tabloid stuff right alongside of it. Hard cases. Don't touch it, warning over sperm whale carcasses. Well, like they'll try to scare you, you know, oh, there's diseases, you'll get diseases. But have you ever seen 300 people up in New Zealand try to get the whales out into the ocean? None of them got diseases or anywhere else. Fear-mongering. That's another sperm whale, emaciated, washed up. Dead mammals can be full of dangerous toxins and other things, so please stay away. Dangerous toxins, you claim? Did you know they used to eat whales constantly 100 years ago? Now they're toxic. The Coast Guard inspected the whale and sent photos, measurements, details. So we're not trying to read the stories, the history museums. And just, Britain is just, the government and the universities, the whole bloody system down there is repulsive. It's really repulsive. There is no... It's 100% police state. The people of Japan are responsible for poisoning of the world's food chain. Let me read that again for you. The people of Japan are responsible for poisoning of the world's food chain. Kind of looks like that right there, I suppose. Oh yeah, no, that's right. It does look like that. That's the Neptunium-238, which decays to plutonium-238, which is not something you want to get in your bones, but you will. Final hour of wither sea whale starving, struck by ship and in rough seas. This is another thing you see in the United Kingdom where they'll try, I see it all the time in the last 2 years or so, where they'll try to blame it on a storm or sonar, which is the stupidest thing imaginable. Because if it was true, you would see these mass events everywhere all the time because the ocean is full of sonar. Struck by ships, which is a new one since the Paris Accord. We've seen that narrative now proliferate constantly because they were able to predict themselves, right? Another dead. And discovered that the whale had not eaten for a while. And one had possibly been struck by a vessel. Oh, and had not eaten for a while. It was dead, and the ship hit it. Is how that actually works. No evidence of recent feeding, and no visible plastic or marine debris was noted. That's disgusting to write that sentence, by the way. No evidence of recent feeding, yes, but no visible plastic or marine debris. It's just gobblish. I actually seen studies where they never actually had a whale that actually died from the ingesting. It's ingesting debris because in the last 10 years the food chain has been broken. That's about the only thing they can catch to eat. Autopsy reveals the whale washed up on the beach, spent his final hours starving. And you can see it in the picture, really. It stands out. All of the whales were juvenile whales, as with nearly every other UK stranded sperm whales. And sperm whales don't hang out in the United Kingdom normally. Can carry diseases that are harmful to pets and humans. They should have told people that 100 years ago because they were eating them all the time. Even when the whales are dead, possession of any part of the animal is strictly illegal. They're property of the Queen. 250 million liters of Fukushima contaminated water is flowed into the Pacific. 250 million. Oh, it's much worse than that. There's what, 250 million a day or something? So, 250 million liters. Each reactor uses around 8 billion liters a day. Or each power plant uses about 8 billion liters a day to keep it cool. And so Fukushima reactor, when it melted down, another bad attribute of that place was that it's built on a old riverbed. The fuel, the tens of millions of pounds in each building of fuel, will go down into the earth at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, atomizing, aerosoling, ionizing, radiating, spewing that out as emissions. And it'll go down and hit the water table. This is the oh shit plan. So the fuel goes down, hits the water table 100 feet down, and it's bedrock, an old river, thousands of year old riverbed. And a riverbed is basically where so much water is run down and washed all the dirt out of the way. Now you have a riverbed. And so the old crap plan is the reactor core goes down, hits that, it's surrounded by water, and that's going to keep flowing downhill into the ocean. Right, because they built it up on purpose on top of an old riverbed. That's actually what they done there. And so the China syndrome was designed, the theory was it was going to stop there. Big whoop. It's better to let it keep going, isn't it? It's going to stop there. And now it's endless water being turned into curium. And that is washed out. And curium, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutoniums. The biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel is going to be curium isotopes. Not cesium, not iodines, and there's lots of them, trust me. But curium's brutal bone seeker, and it ends up in your pelvis. You mutate your stem cells. Oh my. And it can ionize and radiate your thyroid gland from your pelvis, by the way, because it's such a strong emitter. Dead Bruta whale. That's a humpback, I guess, but looks at that. Oh, it's a bride whale on the rocks. Hundreds of gray whales dying off the Pacific coast in unusual event. Well, the only thing unusual is they're all starved to death and emaciated. That's the actual documentation shows. As of December 2020, an estimated 386 gray whales were stranded on the coast from Mexico to Canada. So they're not, that's just gray whales. It's around 7,000 in the last 5 years or something. This isn't the first time gray whales have experienced an unusual mortality event. Yeah, there was a, between 1999 and 2000, when 650 animals stranded. Remember France and India and Pakistan, Russia, many countries were still doing nuclear testing, secretive nuclear testing, right? In that period. NOAA's investigating 70 gray whale deaths along the coastline. And again, you see that story popping up randomly, but rarely. Over 100 whales washed ashore in 1999 to 2000. So, a different story with a different narrative. Hard cases, yeah? Which was back when they were still doing nuclear testing, and they still had, it was not very long after, multiple or hundreds of. So like when I say a nuclear test, you got to realize some of these bombs are equal to 3,800 Hiroshima bombs going off at the same time. It's the same radioactive fallout. So weapons testing was an actual nuclear war, and it was a nuclear war that was carried out over many decades. And so that was one of the catalysts for mass species die-offs. And there was examples of United Kingdom where I think it was the Americans or somebody was doing oceans testing, and what they noticed was that because they knew how many fishermen, how many boats were fishing off the coastline, what they were going to catch, and what the ratios of the male and females of the species were going to be. And they started noticing a lot of species, there was incredible discrepancies that were actually blamed on nuclear testing. Eastern North Pacific gray whale, unusual mortality event. So I looked at all sides of that story, right? Sick and dead finches reported. What we've seen here was the beginning of millions and millions of small insect eaters starving to death, and that they had no muscle mass and no fat reserves left on their bodies when they were found. They were actually emaciated. So it started out as some kind of a mystery. Oh, that's and so last year, this stuff is this was January last year, where 15 whales had washed up. I went down, it's 750 kilometers away from where I'm to. I went down and investigated it. That story's coming up. We'll talk about it when we get there. This was another whale that washed up. Got a bunch of pictures. Let's shoot through them anyway. That's an emaciated whale. A humpback whale. So this video, they're whale fishermen in Japan, and I'm not going to show you everything, but what they do is they bring the whale back to the boat, they hang it upside down and let it drown. And so it's quite violent. It gets quite violent when it's drowning. And you see it's starting to struggle now because it's drowning, right? Tie rope around the whale's tail fin and force his head beneath the water. It took about 20 minutes to drown. That's madness anyway. cruel as they get. Baby sharks are born scrawny and sick because of climate change. Actually, low body weight is emblematic of radiation illness to the parent. So baby sharks are born scrawny and sick, and climate change is Fukushima radioactive fallout. And so it pulses invisible clouds covering the entire planet, pulsing energy every second at 186,000 miles per second. This has been going on for 75 years, but Fukushima was the tipping point. And what you're seeing there is a model based on 20 days. If you let a model run for another 10 days, 2 weeks, it covers the rest of the planet. So just because the model stopped, don't mean the plume is going to stop right there, and that's all of it. It's a very deceptive thing to do, by the way. And so that is climate change for sure, right? It heats up the oceans, heats up all the rivers, the lakes, the estuaries, melts the glaciers, doesn't allow the ice to crystallize. It also gets underneath the ice, so wind now can get underneath the ice. And, it's energy. It's incredible energy. So imagine if you had a snowstorm covering the whole planet at the one time. That would be noteworthy, right? Because it's highly visible and cold and miserable on top of that. But radiation is done exactly that, and it's not cold. And you can't see it or smell it or taste it or hear it or feel it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it. But it's pulsing energy at the speed of light. It invades every species, the bacteria, and so your forests don't break down because the bacteria gets killed off. And the forest, the litter doesn't break down. It's not able to, it doesn't go through the normal process, right? So the forest now starts getting dry and brittle instead of breaking down. And when you have lightning strikes, now you have out of control raging forest fires, and which is what you expect in a highly radioactive continents, which is what we're seeing. So the sharks are being born smaller, malnourished offsprings. Having smaller and malnourished offsprings is problematic. Yeah, which is radiation fallout for sure. Department of Fisheries and Oceans investigating 15 dead pilot whales found on the Port-au-Port Peninsula. That story came out while I was in a hotel down to investigate it myself. And when I got down to Port-au-Port and found the whales, they're emaciated, and that 15 of them washed up 36 days ago. But fishery only reported the story the very morning, a couple hours before I actually got on site. The whales were still there. Some of the whales were dragged down into the sea because they were washed right up by the local roadway. And the problem with that was that the children didn't want to go to school anymore because they were having nightmares because you drive past the whales in the morning and again and this is winter time. So it was a 1,800 mile round trip or 1,800 kilometer round trip for me. That was a brutal trip, and I couldn't believe it. 36 days the whales were there. And they weren't decomposed or breaking down. There was no animals feeding on them. Their eyes wasn't picked out of their heads after 36 days. Just a coincidence, Dana. And Department of Fisheries came out and said, and they weren't starving. I mean, my goodness, man. They were so starving, they were emaciated. You can tell it by looking at them. But to actually put that in the article, they weren't starving, they weren't thin. And the locals were just furious at Fisheries and Oceans. In fact, the locals, there's at least 15 of them or so, had come up and talked to me. And they were really happy to see me because nobody went there to look at the whales except for the first day. Local fisheries had went there and then they drove away and left them there. And the community felt betrayed. after 36 days. Looks they were pursuing food and got confused, said DFO. Like, this is absurdness. They were alive when they washed up, and it's absurd to say they were chasing food and then got lost and ended up on the beach. They're genetic superiorly selected for the ocean, right? They got to be these magnificent creatures, not because they're stupid. So that article came out 2 hours. That was, I just woke up 55 minutes ago. That article had come out. I was shocked when I seen it. Because I heard the rumor that whales had washed up, and I drove 750 kilometers to find out, right? And it was winter time. It was a snowstorm. The last 4 hours I was driving through a snowstorm, for goodness sakes. This has happened to me many times. I got the machine for it, but nevertheless, I'm not no spring chicken no more. There was a melt through, so Fukushima fuel is definitely down with the groundwater, and that's flown into the Pacific. It gets international very quickly. It may already be at the west coast. Then claims no immediate risk. Yeah, it was at the west coast after about 6 days. A 35-foot dead whale recovered from Kuwaiti water, which is really exceptional. And do you think that's an emaciated whale? Because you don't get much more emaciated than that. That was a crazy picture. Second lynx now being cared for at BC Wildlife Park. This one is emaciated too. Severely emaciated. Aside from needing some food, we just want to get a little bit of fat on her. That's emaciated. The cat was found to be emaciated, but had no injuries impeding it from eating. Conservation officers euthanized grizzly bear. The bear was emaciated with extreme tooth wear. Yeah, because it was starving. It was eating rocks or something. 2 New Brunswick reactor developers defend use of liberal connected lobbyists. Never mind, that's not supposed to be there. Excuse me. They always come in two, don't they? 2 newborn humpback whales washed up on the same beach. What's the odds of that? In fact, pre-Fukushima, the odds of having 2 whales wash up on the same beach was the same as getting hit by a Soviet satellite in the next 3 seconds or so. There's an emaciated whale. Wow. St. John's business owner shocked by discovery of dead birds on the sidewalks. This is 60 miles away from me or something. The birds were just randomly going in and running into his building. Volunteers on high alert after pilot whale calf washes up on Christchurch Beach, which is New Zealand. And on high alert. It happens, but not constantly. Dead whale, one of the Manatees' largest, found off Italy. So that whale, that was a strange story where Coast Guard allegedly seen a baby whale and followed it because it was by itself, and it led the Coast Guard to the big whale. It was spotted in the sea Sunday near the popular tourist destination by Coast Guard divers who were first alerted to the presence of a smaller whale, which had since disappeared into the sea. Calf leads Coast Guard to dead whale off Naples, the Irish Time. So, which is a pretty salacious headline, right? That's why they ran with that one. What was the point of that story? I can't remember. It don't want people interfering. Minke whale washes up on beach. And so I collect a lot of these stories. The most stories I'm collecting is they're emaciated. And you can see that one's emaciated. All right, 46 meter long. Stay away, slaves. Yeah, we get it. What's killing the Idaho moose? In many cases, infestation of ticks and other parasites. Well, normally they can keep that at bay, but their immune system is compromised because they eat the tips of a lot of trees. And radiation likes to gather up in the very tips of, say, like pine needles and stuff like that, where people used to collect them to make a tea. It was discovered they were incredibly radioactive. But another thing about the tips of branches is where spiders like to set up their webs, right? From tips to tip, branch to tip, and stuff like that. And you don't see it anymore. This is what we were doing last year. Last summer expedition was going across the province, 900 kilometers. I was 400 kilometers away and still no spiders in the forest. Should be about 500,000 per acre. And you find them on your homes here, which is extraordinary because the insect-eating birds didn't just go devour them. They're out in the open, right? No shelter. And what's going on is you'll see spider webs getting set up from shovels or side of the building to your vehicle and stuff like that. But you won't see it from side of your vehicle to bushes. It'll be the side of your vehicle down to a rock or something, despite the fact there's bushes and trees. It would have made a better spot for the spider web. Which leads one to understand, when you understand the actual amount of radioactive fallout we're talking about, and how plants suck it up, the nuclear industry is insane. Human-caused dead zones threaten the health of Puget Sound. Remember, a lot of the stuff is going to wash down from the mountains to the coastlines, and that will change the pH, and you will get major algae blooms because you're killing the oxygen with this stuff. This stuff kills oxygen. Coronavirus will knock more than a year off the average U.S. life expectancy. I suspect soon they'll blame that on all the whale die-offs and bird die-offs. Oh, it was coronavirus, Dana. As far as I can tell, the coronavirus is the cover story for Fukushima. They knew there was going to be incredible heart problems and lung problems and respiratory and illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries, like an abnormal spike in it. And they needed a cover story, and which one is better? Coronavirus. Like, those masks can't protect you, from a real virus. It's absurd to suggest they can. Good news for bald eagles. And then claiming children don't get it? It's just so stupid. Good news for bald eagle and bats. I don't know what it is, but... So they're trying to blame toxic compounds in fish to explain why bats and eagles have a low calcium in their eggshells, making them infertile. Well, what happens is the radiation ends up in the gonads and the testicles of humans and animals, and they get sterilized, and that's right throughout the food chain. Dead whales in the Mediterranean, possibly one of the largest ever found. It swam into a harbor in a state of distress. The calf rammed its head into the harbor wall several times before retreating back underwater. Then they discovered the fin whale's corpse. The calf is presumed to be the dead whale's offspring. Lucky find a whale vomit, you get like $10,000 a kilogram. So the whales that are washing up in the United Kingdom, they don't want anybody going near us because they want to harvest that stuff. They have a market for it, right? The money goes to the Queen. 12 cool things to know about snowy owls. Like, these are great. There's a lot of great stories too, but we can't cover it because you'll never get through this stuff. A couple of weeks ago, snowy owl in the care of the veterinarian college staff was released back into the wild after recovering from severe emaciation. So an owl eyesight is just amazing. It's legendary, right? And so if it can't find enough food that it's emaciated, it's because its prey is gone. Yeah, they are really amazing. I had my cousin was camping and he was wearing a white T-shirt. It was summertime. It was very dark down in Chaleur Bay on the southwest coast of Newfoundland. And it's very dark going from cabin to cabin. And you usually carry a gun with you back in those days because it was actually a lot of animals. And something came out of the woods and latched onto his chest. He has incredible scars on his chest and was just ripping them wide open. And he grabbed it by the neck and threw it down on the ground. He fired. The 22 was a semi-automatic with 10 rounds. He fired 10 rounds at it but didn't touch it. And it was a owl. He got it stuffed and put it under his TV after it. But he has major scars from the claws on these things. Like you see, he has it on his TV with it wrapped around a piece of wood with claws. It's like, holy shit. There's still chunks of his flesh in the claws. Yeah. More than 100 gannets found dead after high tide pummels the breeding colony. Well, actually, I happen to know quite a bit about gannets. And gannets, they're up high. You can tell this picture if you actually know what you're... They don't nest down at the ground level. They nest on cliffs where no predators can get to them. There's no predator steals gannet eggs because they'll set up colonies on faces of cliffs. Right? There might be a few commune spots in between it, but most of the nests are segregated from all the other gannets, right? It's usually and because they're crashers. They like to crash deep into the ocean. There's what I call crasher birds, where they come down and hit the waves at huge speeds. There you go. And so they like to go after cliffs. They like to be right in the really rough spots. And then they just fall off the cliff and dive straight down and get a meal and come straight back up again and give it to the chick. They don't build their nest, right? So that's a suspect story is what I'm saying. It's a suspect story. More than 100 gannets found dead. No, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying the way they tell this story doesn't match up to the actual doc. You know, we got one of the biggest gannet colonies on the planet is down here, right? I went there last year. There was 30,000 of them, which is more birds than we've seen in 6 years of expeditions to Alaska. New York Times, ocean life faces mass extinction. We may be on the precipice of a major extinction event. It's not just marine life, sadly, right? More than 700 pelicans found dead in the World Heritage Sites. They got Chernobyl as a World Heritage Site, for goodness sakes. Chernobyl! So World Heritage Site doesn't mean jack shit. 750 pelicans found dead. They were juveniles and 10 were adults. There's 350 species of birds, and only pelicans were found dead because they feed on certain species, right? And if you don't find them, then they have a failure. I don't know I can't remember exactly what happened. This month, now these outbreaks of highly pathogenic bird flus, what we seem the pattern we're seeing over the last decade, it's easy to assume that the birds were highly radioactive or their food chain was broken. We have so many stories we've covered, it's just absurd. So like a pathogen is not just going to attack the young birds. 25 Fraser dolphins stranded is more, like, because it's all young, its majority is young, is most likely there was a food chain disruption because of Fukushima. 25 Fraser dolphins stranded, 10 found dead. So all species are stranding. It's not just pilot whales like they want you to think. And pilot whales don't have a consistent history pre-Fukushima. It was a random thing, right? We see it in all species, not just one species. Local responders rescued 8 of the dolphins, at least 7 back into the water. They also do explosive fisheries down there where they throw dynamite down into the water. It's pretty hard to miss the dolphins, though. Whenever you heard, so think about this, how they framed it. Records of the Philippines Marine Stranding Networks say Bicol has a high incidences of mass stranding for the past 3 years. Making the area a hot spot for strandings for the past 3 years. Fukushima radioactive fallout. This model is based on France's model. This is France's model, rather, from the government. And the model runs for 15 days. So after 15 days, you got the entire Pacific, all of Alaska, everything else, the Bering Sea, the northern passages. You got all of the northern, you got all of America, Canada, Iceland, Greenland, Europe. You got all the Atlantic, all of the European, all of it. This is only 16 days. If you run the model for 26 days, and you actually use some of the actual real numbers, a 69-year-old man suffered major injuries in cougar attacks out in Whistler. We got skier chased by bear at a ski resort. It's crazy. That's crazy. Sorry about that. I'll fix that. So you got Buddy don't even know the bear's chasing him. He's taking his time, right, going back and forth. People are yelling out to him, bear. Look at that bear go, man. That's terrifying, eh? You're out there skiing, having a vacation, you turn around, here comes a bear. Everybody's freaked out. He doesn't know the bear's chasing him because he's zigzagging back and forth. And the bear is chasing him as zigzagging back and forth too. That's craziness, eh? But it's amazing how fast that bear can run downhill, isn't it? Scientists puzzled by 30,000 Chinooks that seem to be missing from the Yukon River. The Yukon River is surrounded by the Rocky Mountains. So the Rocky Mountains, because we've done all the Rocky Mountains all the way up to Alaska, they're missing the glacier. The glaciers are now gone, and the government refuses to acknowledge it. I was doing an interview with CBC, and it didn't publish the interview. They were trying to find something to demonize me with, right? They done 2 interviews. And when I got to the story about where I was going from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska, because I was trying to bring the whole story together, I said, well, all the glaciers are actually missing. They're not actually there like they claim. They're actually missing, because I documented and put it up on my website, right? Year after year. And so the glaciers, in hot summers, droughts, what normally would happen was the glaciers would start melting quite a bit. That water would come down the rivers, the lakes, the estuaries, the streams, all the way to the coastlines, and it regulated the temperature. So when you had serious droughts, it would melt even more, and it would keep the level of the rivers high enough the salmon can get back up. What we were seeing was that the salmon couldn't get up the estuaries into the rivers, and so they were laying their eggs at the mouth of the estuaries, and they've never seen that before. So there was a failure, because you needed the cold water from the glaciers to regulate the temperatures. But that's going to be true for all the insects and all the mosquito larvae and everything else in the streams and rivers and ponds and estuaries that were fed from the Rocky Mountains. They still needed that cold water, because that was the cycle of life, right? When you broke that cycle, which happened in increments over several years, we documented. Originally, the glaciers were there. After a couple of years, the glaciers in the summertime were completely gone. And I was called all kinds. I was attacked by hundreds of nuclear trolls constantly. Argentina's sea lions starving to death. Argentina's seals and sea lions are starving to death. Yeah, they shouldn't have wrinkles, right? For instance, the one to your left. These are being released, I think, back into the ocean. Overfishing, climate change are the main reasons. Of course, climate change is caused by radioactive fallout from Fukushima is the tipping point. We have 75 years of radiation going into the environment, hemorrhaging, but Fukushima was a major event. Scarcity of food. Yeah, well, starving to death means no food. You can yell climate change all you want, it's called no food. Huge rise in dead seals, and many with apparent gunshot wounds. Well, the birds will normally peck a hole through the seal and actually poke their head right in there and start eating the seal from the inside. That's how the figures have reached a worrying 47 of the protected marine wildlife species washed up within 6 weeks. Several seals with gunshot wounds washed up on Cork Beach. That was denied, though, when they done necropsies on them. Pictures of dead animals surfaced online have been deemed too sensitive to share here. They won't hesitate a second to vilify and demonize and destroy your life, but they won't show a picture of a dead seal. With more washing up similar circumstances, which was debunked by the government apparently. Probe into washed up seals in Cork as gunshot theory is dismissed. Because it looks like a gunshot, don't it? But that's what a bird does. That's a bird pecking a hole in it and sticking his head in there and having his way with it. Red tide responsible for dead birds. Now, I've seen red tide my whole life growing up, but you didn't see the dead birds. There have been a large number of sick royal terns. So the terns are showing up emaciated all over the place too. So this particular lot, they're blaming it on red tide. But that's because all the species are dying there, and they're trying to blame it all on like the demonic acids and stuff like that, which is caused by no oxygen in the ocean, because the radiation, one of the first victims is at the surface, is the phytoplankton, which lives at the surface of the ocean. It's the smallest creature. And it also includes, though, like oyster legs, 11 million eggs. When they're originally laid, they're considered phytoplankton. And codfish lay 700,000 eggs each. So they're considered phytoplankton also, not just plant. And that's the basis of the food chain, the basis of the oxygen chain, the basis of the carbon sequestering chain. So they're wiped out right away because they're at the surface of the ocean. The ocean is the biggest surface on the planet. The radioactive fallout covers all of those surfaces immediately with sustained bombardment, and then the radiation stays suspended from the surface to the ocean floor forever. Although recent water samples from Florida, blah, 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 said a decrease in the red tide levels. He said that doesn't mean there isn't a patch out there somewhere with the bird's name written all over. So they're plankton bird feeders. They feed on plankton, see? And plankton's highly radioactive, bioaccumulated. They usually feed in small groups on top of that, right? Yeah, they eat fish, that's right too. It's the skimmers I was thinking of, I think. Not a good time for dolphins. On a daily basis, dead or dying dolphins on a daily basis, they have to go out into a system. That's craziness. Interaction with humans. Rule out bad weather, as dolphins are able to survive adverse marine conditions. See, it's hard to believe that they wrote that sentence. Experts ruled out bad weather, which of course, United Kingdom's constantly blaming everything on bad weather, because animals can only survive in perfect weather. Let's keep it rolling here, baby. 52 short-finned pilot whales stranded on an Indonesia beach found dead. They are suspecting that a whale in the school was injured or sick, so the rest followed and guarding it. No, they don't commit suicide, because look, if that was true, right, they would never live long enough to get a group, because when one gets sick, they all go commit suicide. But that's not what history has showed us. History showed us that only is true since Fukushima, where you see it, like it happened randomly over the years, but the period that we recorded was all during heavy nuclear testing also. 7 whales dead, 42 still stranded, a feral spit. So on the one hand, the British are like, don't go near the animals, they got parasites, you'll get sick, blah, blah, blah. On the other hand, you get hundreds of volunteers, goes out and rescues whales, nobody gets sick. It's a really interesting one. Yeah, I lost a leg because I was helping a whale from parasites, but it was worth it. I've never heard that story. Orcas off Liberia, are they aggressive or just too curious and friendly? Well, there was a lot of it, but it's not normal, right? So it's all happened in a short period of time, and there was a pattern. So nobody knows for sure, but 9 pilot whales dead, is close to 50 stranded in Golden Bay. They can't find food. They're a pack, right? They can't find food. They're all starving at the same time. They wash up dead on the beaches. That seems to be the consensus. This is constant, non-stop mass strandings, mass suicides is not normal. It's random over years, but a lot of it can be traced to nuclear testing. For instance, currently, in 2019, studies showed over 1 million square kilometers that the Bikini Atoll is highly radioactive from 1 million square kilometers. And so there's migratory animals that go through there and then they die somewhere else. And bless their hearts, eh? At least they're trying. 150 volunteers at the scene, none of them got sick from parasites from the whales that the British are always claiming. It's really revolting, really, what they do. The sea turtle team has also been at work documenting live sea turtle strandings that happened over the past 2 weeks. All 5 washed up dead. And then everything's automatically blamed on red tide. So this was like 100 kilometers away from me. I guess it's more than that. 200 kilometers away from me. Boys Cove. That's a crazy picture, isn't that? Isn't that amazing? A whale frozen into the ice with an eagle on top of it, using it for a perch. And so the 15 pilot whales that washed up here were right there. They washed up right along this spot right here. And I'm over here in that area. And these whales are up here. Or that whale is frozen into the bay. The animal was in very poor condition when it came in. Emaciated. 93 dolphins and whale deaths are reported, a record. Another record here, just in the first 2 months of the year, rather. The Irish Whale and Dolphin Group received 70 reports in 2020 in the winter months, which was unprecedented, but it was surpassed this year with 93 strandings. So an acceleration of dead, dying sea mammals. Since you believe the pandemic has meant more people are out walking their local shores, it's actually less. I just hate these people, eh? Shark warning: a second whale washes up on Victoria beaches in Australia in a matter of weeks. And that one's emaciated. 3 sperm whales stranding on a beach, all now dead. They were all emaciated. You can tell just looking at them on top of that. They all died the next day. Our main focus is the safety of the public. And Australia is captured by the British one before. You remember what the British done to Australia? They took their nuclear weapons all the way to Australia, waited for the wind to blow across Australia, then they set off their nuclear weapons. Anyway, the whales are emaciated, clearly. We're studying a whale in Washington River, and we had 4 stories of whales that have swam way up rivers in just a couple of weeks during this period. Right? And whales don't go up freshwater rivers. Eh? They were escaping the ocean. A gray whale far upriver in Washington's Columbian River, which is a death sentence because Hanford's up that river. Has anyone ever heard of a whale being this far upriver? The group asked. No. Study finds malnourishment contribute to mobile whale death. That was another one. In Mobile Bay, which is a fresh water, it was emaciated. The whale may not have eaten for weeks or months before it stranded in the bay, far from deep water the species normally inhabit. They work to keep pilot whale from stranding in Wellfleet. This also is way upriver. This is another separate one. They're trying to keep a pod of pilot whales from stranding in the creek and rivers. Concerns unclear about a high rate of dolphin whale strandings. In Ireland so far this year. Grey whale spotted in the Columbia River near, I mean, that's craziness going up to the fresh water. Also last year there's one that went all the way to Montreal. Never seen in 300 years something like that. This was all in the same period as these whales too. Different places in the world, the stories were starting to show up of whales going way up the river, and that continued for several months, those types of stories, right? Armed and ready British military set for $80 billion upgrade with kamikaze drones. Kamikaze drones. And now they gotta demonize somebody so they can go use them, right? How many suicide bombers does it take to equal one of those drones or ships, I wonder? Scientists proposes building an ark on the moon. Look, if a scientist proposes something, it's the last thing you want to do. That's what we discovered about scientists. They have betrayed us so many times in so many ways, and such evilness, it's impossible to ever want to trust these creatures again. There's an alien, there is aliens on Earth, they're called scientists. As soon as they get a little itty tiny bit of power, they lose their freaking mind and call for exterminating all species. So here's a university researcher for the average person, unless you actually work with a university, then your research means jack shit. They're not able, they have no critical thinking skills whatsoever. Not everybody, obviously, but the majority of people do not have any critical thinking. They've been it's not their fault. They're good people, I'm sure, if you gave them a proper education or even a bit of an education. But they've been sucked into the machine, which is your universities and medias, and they start regurgitating the narratives, and there's nothing you can do for these people. To a global nuclear war, which they've already had, right? That was called nuclear weapons tests. This nuclear bomb explosion, you can buy this on Amazon.com. Remember that? We covered this last year. That's a cool lamp in one way, but it's not in many ways, because the radioactive fallout for that changed the sex ratios of all the species on the planet. So more males than females because of nuclear testing worldwide. Pieces of a jawbone stolen from a sperm whale that was gone. So if a whale washes up on your beach and you take the jawbone, and then the next storm the whale washes out and sinks, does it matter? Of course it doesn't. But the media will cut your throat if you do something like that. Only scientists are allowed to do that. Only the crazy lunatic, human trash, KK scientists are allowed to do that. If they do wash up, it's normally because they are sick or old or struck by a ship, Farrell said. Because they're sick or old or struck by a ship. It's the opposite. The whale is dead, and then it gets hit by the ship because it's floating around. You know, we used to go in the ocean 3 o'clock every morning. We'd get out of bed, and 3:30 we sail out of the harbor. And for the next couple of hours you'd be sailing along. And it was typical to have 6, 7, 8,000 whales with you when you were doing that. And if you were worried about hitting the whale, so you would slow the boat down because there's so many whales sometimes, right? But father would come up and grab the throttle and put it back up at the RPM it's supposed to be at and laugh at you because he said there's no way you're going to hit a whale. Nobody in all the fishing communities have ever hit a whale, Dana. And he's right, and we never did. Now you can't go out without hitting a whale, apparently. Towed it out to sea posed navigational hazards, you know. Struck by a ship, navigational hazards. They don't want to tow the dead whale up because it poses a navigational hazard. You know, it gets struck by ships. That whale is emaciated. They never got killed by a ship. Got hit after, maybe, but it never got killed by the ship. It is emaciated. A stink alert, that's how you disconnect people, right, when you do stuff like that. Dead whale, a stink alert. It's because they had so many whales washing up, they started using these derogatory terminologies to switch people off so they wouldn't have empathy. To inflict apathy is a cruel thing to do to society. Right whale calf spotted in waters off the east end of Long Island. Right whale and calf. And so if the industry, universities and that find out about a whale, they'll go out and torture it, chase it, and they'll stick darts into it. They'll go try to tag it. They'll torture the whale. The whale is now just another guinea pig for the lunatic crew. If you go out there to get a picture, you get now you get like $1 million fine for harassing the whales, right? Out in British Columbia. It's a rare sighting in local waters or anywhere in the world. A right whale and a new calf swim off East Hampton. They're hanging out down here in the St. Lawrence because they can't find krill anywhere in their normal places. So they don't really hang out in the St. Lawrence, but now they do. Gray whale dies after beaching and some of the gray whales died. It was really something, eh? It's hard to tell with these pictures, but it looks emaciated to me because it's concaved. You can see its spine sticking up. You're not supposed to be able to see a spine of a whale, by the way. The whale was sick, and also notice how thin it appeared. How thin it appeared. So it was emaciated. It looked thin. It looked real skinny. Spiders bioaccumulate radioactive silver at 1,000 times the level in soil. It's not just going to be silver. And they've been exterminated on the west coast and here and on the east coast. In their natural habitat, they're actually exterminated. We found 3 spider webs last year. One of them was on 3 rocks. It wasn't a functional spider web, and there was no spider in it. And the other 2 were over a little stream, a little creek alongside of a spot I was camping in. And I missed it on the first day and spotted it on the second day. And typically you would check a spider web because that would tell you the different species of insects that are in the local area. It's a quick way to figure out what's the local insect population, like you check a few spider webs. Now you can't find the spiders, let alone the webs. This one was in trouble. The gray whale was spotted and died, 25 feet long. Usually weighs about 2,000 pounds, but this one was very malnourished. So it was a young calf, and it was emaciated. What a coincidence. It's not like I picked all these stories out this way, right? That's just as they come at you, right? Dead whale washes up on Blith Beach. And that's emaciated. A deceased juvenile. Clingy seal holds hand with diver. This was a doctor who done this as a hobby, and he's been doing it there for like 20 years. So the seal actually grew up knowing him, right? He interacted with the seal several times a week. This wasn't a random seal like they're projecting. And I got 14,000 hours underwater doing that as a commercial diver. And I've swam in a spot where there's 3 million seals. They grab onto your fins, they're grabbing on all your hoses, they're grabbing on to your gauges, they're grabbing onto your equipment. It was torture. I remember diving this one spot up by Alaska, and I was working 50 feet down and under an overhang face. There's a lot of shadows there, and there's a lot of little caves there. I particularly don't like those spots because creatures live in those caves, right? And out there you get the giant Pacific octopus. It's like 15-foot span on it, 150 pounds. A big animal to get freaking pissed off at you. And I must have been there for 10, 15 minutes, and I was moving along, headed out. I was trying to go around a point, and I didn't want to break the dive tables, right? And so I was about to give up on it because I was starting to go a little bit deeper than I wanted to. And all of a sudden, this big shadow right at that spot where I was trying to make my turn, I had stopped. And when you're down there, you're using both of your hands, right? You're wearing 100 pounds of lead. And so at that time, I wasn't wearing fins. I was wearing boots, heavy boots with big leads around my ankles, and 2 20-pounders on my shoulders and 50 pounds on my waist to anchor me down because I had to lug around 900 pounds worth of gear. And this seal come flying out of this little spot probably 5 feet away from me. He's probably 100 pounds or something. And it was just, he came right past me. He could have, I guess, went the other way, but he wasn't worried about me. He came right past me. It took a few moments to register what it actually was. But I had to go up to the boat anyway, right after that. I get a cup of hot chocolate and change my clothes. Yes, he done that to me. I found that you can never get over the fear when you were down there. Like I had sea lions have harassed me so much that I probably dropped 300 weight belts, I guess, in my time that I had to go back and get after. You had to get out of there because you're under siege. And blowing bubbles is a sign of aggression with a seal lion. So sea lions will go down and blow bubbles at each other, and the first one to go up to the surface for a breath is considered the loser. And of course, sea lions get a couple of 1,000 pounds, right? Especially the California gray sea lions and golden sea lions, rather. So I see him. I start blowing bubbles like crazy. The sea lion would come up to my face, blow bubbles. Then he would eventually have to go up to the surface to get oxygen. Because the females were okay. They would come over and do acrobats, right? But the males would get in your face. And one of the tricks of the males were they would swim at you. They would go up and get air. They would come down. And then they would come straight at you along the ocean floor. And they'd be coming at you. And you're like, oh, man, here we go. And at the last second, they're going to turn. And so, you know how you're in a bathtub and you got, as a kid, you have a bar of soap there and you go like this over the bar of soap, and by the bar of soap starts rolling. That's what the sea lion would do with me. Totally disrespected me. It never physically touched me ever, but I couldn't conquer my fear. And because underwater they look 25% bigger, so something that weighs 2,000 pounds is looking even bigger again. They're bigger than your couch, right? Their heads are when they're coming at you. And they're very aggressive, and the only way to deal with them is you got to get out of the water and wait for them to go away or calm down. But anyway, this guy is he knew this seal's mother when she was born, and then she had this baby. He knew this baby. These are residential seals. He built up a rapport with seals in the area after 20 years of recording and observing them. You remember that Wallace Walrus showed up? There was a mortality event for walruses after Fukushima up in Alaska because there was a big pulse. When the ice melted in 2012, the summer of 2012, it had accumulated so much radiation. There was a huge pulse of radioactive fallout going on up there. So they were losing their hair and they were dying of cancers and leukemias and all kinds of diseases. And there was a lot of them dying off, and it was associated with Fukushima. Seal dies on Flexstowe Beach. One day after, a porpoise was found on the same beach. Right, so you get these weird stories where it's just one animal. Most people are going to ignore it. I got to read everything. And you see these strange, right, these strange connotations where, oh, there's a porpoise just died on the same beach also. To monitor an adult common seal struggling in the sea following stormy weather. This is absurdness. Like, first off, as a commercial diver, one thing you notice was that once you get below the, say you got 10-foot waves, once you get down to 10 feet, it's flat calm. It's always going to be the same. So the storm wave is only going as deep as it is going to go high. If it's a 30-foot sea, 30 feet below it is perfectly normal. And these animals are genetically superior selected for that habitat. That's totally their home. It's always stormy seas for these animals. These animals don't live in normal, calm, perfect environments, for God's sakes. So to, right, put it that connotation, because following stormy weather, and associate that with mass strandings, it's unbelievably disingenuous, and I disrespect the people for doing it. After a time, the seal began to drift, and it died under the pier. And there's a seal killer right there, worldwide. 70 orcas target young blue whale in 4-hour killing orgy off Washington coast. I got footage when I was coming down to get fuel and groceries and do some laundry at Shearwater by Billa, which is in the middle of nowhere, right? It's in the middle of the solar system, theoretically speaking. And there was about a dozen plus killer whales had killed a gray whale calf, and we were eating it as I was coming in the channel. And I had turned off my sounder, and they had come up and hung out by my boat. I had videotaped that. We used to play it, but they took down my site, so I can't direct you to it. I like those pictures where I see birds. I'm always happy when I see birds, because you rarely see birds anymore. Out in nature, right? In the cities, they got all kinds of bird feeders and stuff. It is one of just a few documented cases of orca attacks on a blue whale. Well, when you're starving, right? So when you see the whales up in Puget Sound, which are considered residential orcas, emaciated, and they're blaming them because they won't eat, there's no salmon for them, right? But if you go look up what does an orca eat, it eats up to 360 different marine animals and birds and beavers, or otters rather, and porpoises and seals and sea lions and halibut and octopus, you name it, it eats it. Seagulls. And so, yeah, some animals might be specialized animals, but if they're starving, they're starving. And it's not a big transition for them to eat something else, particularly when all the other transient whales that come through the area do that. Galveston fisherman captures video of rare orcas sighting in the Gulf near Galveston. Watch pod of rare killer whales swim near fishing boats. That was considered extraordinary. This was the first time the captains ever seen killer whales in the Gulf of Mexico. So we're starting to we see a lot of stories like that in the last few years where whales are showing up in some incredibly strange places. Ex-fisherman exposed to the 1954 the Lucky Dragon. Nuclear test died of pneumonia at 87. Oh, that wasn't the Lucky Dragon, I'm sorry. Exposed... No, the nuclear test, that's right. That's the Lucky Dragon crew, right? Yeah, that's the Lucky Dragon crew. Not so lucky. They were about, don't quote me off the top of my head, I'm just trying to remember. I think it was 120 miles away or something, and they got lethal doses. And so he was an anti-nuclear all the way up until he died, bless his heart. And we appreciate him speaking out for so many decades. Thank goodness people like that had the fortitude and were stoic and had contributed to the Castle Bravo test. Was one of 67. Like one of those tests here was the Bravo. It was equal to 1,000 Hiroshima nuclear weapons going off at the same time. So that single bomb was a nuclear war on its own, right? The radioactive fallout is the same. Aggressive wildlife is sparking major concerns. That was here in British Columbia, rather. Yeah, Amur, British Columbia. Is that a cougar? Yeah, that's a cougar. Attacked by a cougar, and the dog was attacked. Cougar was emaciated. Everybody, and the cougar was in looking for pets. That's a skinny looking cougar, baby. And then coyotes in Vancouver were biting people constantly. Not looking for food, but coming up and actually biting them and grabbing children. That's crazy, eh? Entire group of whales somehow escaped human attention. It's not easy because the academic world is so fake, right? Nearly 90 endangered white whales spotted off Cape Cod in a single day. That's an absurd amount. This lady here, she gets... you'll see anyway. A raccoon comes and frightens the daylights out of her. I don't know who got the biggest... That's pretty weird for a raccoon to do that, though. It really is. Who knows what that was all about. This was down in 80 melonhead whales washed ashore. April of last year. Because we're doing just a recap. We're just running through the rest of this now. Some were alive. Nobody knows how many actually showed up. There is some pretty bizarre pictures coming up. So remember, radiation for animals and birds and insects and humans, when you get this in your body, it's by a factor of 1 trillion. So, because you might think of an atom as just this one single encounter. It gets in your body, it pulses energy at the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second, every second for the rest of your life. So it's like 1 trillion attacks. And so you know how how a balloon explodes. Well, that's what an atom does. It does that every second with an incredible amount of energy. So it's destroying DNA and chromosomes in every direction. And it also radiating organs and your heart and everything else at the same time. And so your body has to attack that. This despicable, disgusting, parasitic, freaking creature in Taiwan. That's another picture of him in the white shirt. A ruthless scum nuclear physicist. Just incredibly ruthless scum. He was on a food strike here, on a hunger strike rather, in 2018. Wait for it. He went on a hunger strike because he wanted Taiwan to import food from a nuclear wasteland, so he couldn't get his own way. And he actually went on a hunger strike to try to get them to vote. And he successfully got it into a ballot, but it was rejected by the constituents. And so, but he was sitting on a dead whale, because you never seen nothing like it before. And so you do strange stuff, right, when you never seen stuff. And that's, they're over in, I'm assuming that's where it was, right there. But the actual name they were using wasn't definitive for, but I imagine that's the spot anyway. Over 80 large mammals, so there's a lot of stories came in about that. And they piled them all up in the truck and took them somewhere. Who knows where they're gone? These locals filled up the truck and took off. They're starving to death, so. Alga bloom targets sea otters' hearts. You know, another thing that causes heart problems is radiation. Hang on, I'll find it real quick for you. Uh, 14.2% of children across Japan per 100,000. I screwed that up to it. I'll do that again. 14.2% of children, neonates and infants, need open heart surgery. 14,200 children per 100,000 in Japan need open heart surgery. That's an incredible statement, isn't it? And I'll show you an example of what I'm talking about here. The death rates might give the creeps to some people. Extreme increase of mortality caused by heart diseases. The number of deaths was up 12.5% compared to the same month of the year before. Was an extra 12,700 people died of heart attacks in a single month. That's from radiation exposure. So when you see stories where otter hearts, we know that off California, the kelp was looking at 40 million becquerels for a little kelp bed of just iodine 131. And all the algae was destroyed from Vancouver to Alaska, last expedition we done on that coastline. North Sea whale deaths raises bycatch safety fears. Do you think that's really a bycatch right there? The industry is insane, by the way. Humpback whale feast on shoalfish and krill. And krill are like big shrimp, about the size of your thumb, and they can live for, say, 10 years. Chaos of clicks and sounds from the low as 70 orcas kill a blue whale. We already talked about that, right? These worms washed up on a beach. Nobody knows what they are. And it might tell us where they're to in a second. I thought it was Vietnam, I can't remember. Or the Philippines have a case of mystery worms to solve. Millions and millions of worms came up on the beach on March the 30th. Yeah, that would definitely be creepy, man. It's definitely an unusual one. Nobody knew what it was down there. I don't know what it is. It's a pretty amazing story of Mother Nature, hopefully, that people didn't realize until now. Because the ocean is largely unexplored, right? We've only explored around 4% of the ocean. We managed to kill the oceans, but we only know about 4% of the ocean floor. They gradually grew in numbers until there was millions of these things. That's pretty amazing. And after 3 hours, they all mysteriously disappeared again. That's a crazy story. Role of sonar uncertain in the death of 8 whales. Uncertain? Well, I suppose there could be, certain circumstances where it happens. Because the military sonar is different, right? But you got Russia's military, China's military, India and Pakistan, Canada's, and everybody else's, and using sophisticated sonar devices. And we've never seen it linked. And what they claim is that the whales are coming up fast and they get nitrogen narcosis. But you can only get nitrogen narcosis. Whales can't get it. That's their environment. They're designed to do that. Whales don't do decompression when they're coming up. They don't stop at 80 feet and wait 10 minutes and come up another 10 feet and wait 10 minutes. They're whales. And so usually decompression injuries are associated with breathing compressed air. Right? That's why you would have those issues. Whales take their breath at the surface and saturate their body with oxygen and are able to excrete that to sustain a dive. It's natural for them. They don't have to think about it. They don't need a computer. Whales can learn about danger and can warn each other, according to a study of how they dodged whaling ships in the 19th century. Well, first off, their calls can be heard, say, 200 kilometers away and talk to each other. And so if one of them's in a lot of pain and is yelling, they can hear that. If they keep associating with one of these ships, right, they obviously can't be stupid because of the things they do. But we have been assaulted for our entire life with propaganda through mass hypnotic machine known as media. And there's we have a whole planet of Stockholm Syndrome at this stage. They changed their behaviors to dodge whaling ships in the 1800s, according to the study. And I'm not denying they did. I believe they're smart animals. I don't believe that animals are stupid. The animals, like people are talking about birds flying into windows. And first off, like, have you ever seen a bird flying among the trees? Going crazy, chasing after insects or something? Or just maniacs flying through the trees? It's amazing. The reflex is instantaneous. And most windows give off a reflection. But I've seen not lots, but I've seen examples of birds where they're hitting the walls and crashing. I have seen that myself, so not windows, but actual walls. So who knows? Mind-blowing die-off in the Pacific. I never heard of such a thing anywhere in the world. Beaches full of bodies, countless carcasses. We want to know if it's Fukushima. Seal and sea lion beach burial disturbed the locals. And they were having so many animals washing up on the beach, they started burying them on the spot. And the locals got their $1 million homes right there on the beach, right? Laguna Beach. Sea lions at least 3 times over the last month, they were burying dead animals out in front of their houses, and they got sick of it, right? So you wouldn't have heard of the story, only that they were complaining, and then you realize what? You had animals going up on the same beach extended over a period of time. These are extraordinary events, by the way. 4 dead whales now found around San Francisco Bay in 9 days. This is craziness. An unusual spat, really, of grey whale deaths. Yet another animal has been found washed up. They were almost all emaciated. And so finding dead whales on the shores of the bay is not unheard of, because it happened a couple of years ago. It never happened pre-Fukushima, only post-Fukushima. But 4 in 9 days is abnormality. Well, the number went up to like 12 or 13, didn't it, over the next couple of weeks? The cause of death was unclear. The whale's condition was good, no illnesses. In fact, the whale had a full stomach from a recent feeding, ruling out starvation or malnutrition. Now, why would you say something like that? Right, really? Why would you say something like that? Because we've been covering this for years. It's only recent they start saying stuff like that. Ruling out starvation. All the other grey whales are starving. How come they didn't? 2019 also saw a rise in dead grey whales around San Francisco. Though half of those animals' causes of deaths were ruled malnutrition. So they didn't want to repeat the next year, so they said, no, they had food in their stomach, it wasn't starvation. Stop listening to Durnford, he's fear-mongering. Giant dead whales found in Bangladesh beach. Like, do you think that I photoshopped all these stories tonight and that the animals are all normal, they're not emaciated? That's just Dana Photoshop and everything? Because if you do, you got a lot more belief in me than I do. I couldn't do it. Cause of death will be investigated and the corpse will be removed from the beach. It's emaciated. This giant dead whale, 44 feet long. It's hard to say. Once again, I'm not trying to cover the stories. We're just going to talk our way through them, basically. And possibly move to hundreds of radioactive materials and 1,200 radionuclides. They want you to think it's just cesium, by the way. There's over 1,000 you got to worry about. 2 dead whales wash up in Bangladesh beach. On the same stretch of Bangladesh coastline in 2 days. And they're usually found, they're bride's whales, they're definitely never found down there. He said he could be killed with a collision with a ship, or have died from eating plastic, which litters the sea. Or they could be emaciated. Does that even look like a whale to anybody? That's an emaciated whale. But just because the media is again, the role of sonar is certain it's in death. That's an emaciated whale right there. That's really despicable that he done that, by the way, trying to blame it all on the sonar, because we would see it uniformly worldwide, because sonar is not unique to the United Kingdom. Here's what killed one of the last whales of newly discovered Gulf of Mexico species. It was emaciated. The endangered rice whale was emaciated. Researchers observed pygmy killer whales off Maui in 2019. The data was concerning. A team of researchers tracked 6 pygmy killer whales off Maui for 3 weeks. They found they were losing weight at an alarming rate. Dead whale floating near white rock towed to shore for a necropsy. Who knows? Radioactive fallout never left anybody safe, right? Dead whales stranded on this beach, that beach, them beaches, these beaches, those beaches. Seacoast marine mammal rescue documents washed up mink whales. Sometimes you gotta go to the large screen just to read it. No sign of gear entanglement. Mystery die-off continues. Gray whales. Another dead whale found in San Francisco Bay, the 5th in under a month. Remember, all the ones the year before were emaciated. This is an unusual mortality event. Malnourished. No signs of illnesses or trauma, but they figure malnourished. Right whale spotted in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, prompting closures of the crab fishing zones. You got to close nuclear. You can't save anything if you don't close the nuclear industry down. Your nuclear industry is the plague. It's the atomic plague on our planet. 2 basking sharks washed up on the west coast within days of each other. They're plankton feeders, right? Yeah, they're plankton feeders, that's right. Plankton was wiped out. Rare blue whale found dead at Walrus Bay after suspected ship strike. But that's emaciated. That's an emaciated whale right there. Gets struck by a ship after, right? Because it's floating around. That whale is emaciated, my man. Unequivocally. Cause of death was a ship strike from being emaciated. It was dead floating around. This is a weird. They never seen nothing like this. Thousands of cockatoos take over a neighborhood. How cool is that, eh? They're a cool bird, whether you realize it. Nothing is sacred. That's a nice camera. Thousands of little parrots took over a community. They got driven out of their natural habitat by something. Starvation? I don't know. They weren't dead, so I don't know. It is an amazing story, though, because they've never seen nothing like it before. They're hanging out in the road, going around pecking, and it's because they're starving. That is insane. That is just unbelievable. Yeah, that was amazing. Emaciated gray whale spotted off Ogden Point. Big bold letters. Gotta like that. Emaciated. Cause of death determined for 5th whale that washed ashore in San Francisco. Can anybody guess? I'll give you 5 guesses. The first 4 don't count. That's emaciated, Dana. Lucky guess. Oh, from a blunt force trauma from a ship strike. But it was emaciated. Couldn't get out of the way. It was already dead, just floating around. I don't know, but that's an emaciated whale, buddy. Wally the whale lost in the Mediterranean, thousands of miles away from its natural habitat in the Pacific Ocean. And so they had a bunch of scientists chasing it around 24 hours a day. They had Global Hawk predator drones coming in and keeping an eye on it. They never seen nothing like it. We're seeing it everywhere. There are all kinds of whales going up rivers and estuaries and stuff like that. I can't remember what that story is about. Oh, the Arctic sunrise. Yeah, they're chasing that whale around the Mediterranean, a humpback whale or gray whale, I can't remember. 3 more dead whales wash up in San Francisco. Emaciated. Brings the total to 9. And they never would go into San Francisco. The whale was still alive and underweight. AKA emaciated, Dana. U.S. biologists probed the death of 70 emaciated gray whales. 70 emaciated gray whales. Looking for a ship to strike them so they can be catalogued as ship strike. Scientists are worried that 1,000 gray whales have died so far this year. Well, first off, if you find 70 dead whales, you meant 700 died, because you only find about 10%, right? About 170 endangered seals found dead on Russia's Caspian coast. Remember, we covered that. Over 1,000 gray whales have died this year. 170 seals in fresh water. Researchers say the deaths may have been caused by industrial pollution, fishing, poaching, meteorite strikes, Pokemon Go. If a scientist say it, just disregard it right away. Maybe this is a consequence of climate change. Or maybe they were on a hunger strike because they wanted vacation pay for being seals, overhunting and pollution. They threw everything at the wall, right? It's like dirty underwear. You keep throwing it at the wall till it sticks. When it comes to these people, these are endangered whales on top of that in Pakistan coast. 3 more gray whales found dead in San Francisco Bay. 214 gray whales washed up dead on the west coast that year. Scientists say it could happen again. And then they downplay it, right? The true die-off is unknown, possibly between 1,000 and 2,000 whales. Since then, the issue has faded from the headlines. We're almost through this now. That's an emaciated whale. Lost gray whales spotted in the French Riviera. Again, like this, you see this pattern of whales going way up freshwater drinks. This is not their environment at all. Their prey is not going to be up there. And you've seen it symmetrically right around the world, this phenomenon that we've never seen pre-Fukushima, only post-Fukushima. Strayed from its natural habitat and reappeared along the coast of the French Riviera. It was observed in Morocco in March, Italy in recent weeks, Naples, Rome, Genova. It's the first time for the French coast. It's quite unusual as most of the population lives between California winter and Alaska in the summer. Don't get lost. It's like my migration for these animals is instinct. They seem to be fairly good health, but thinned, emaciated. Scientists seek to understand the increase in grey whales' death on the west coast. It's scary. If scientists are looking at it, you know something evil is going to come out of it. The recent sighting of an emaciated grey whale off Vancouver Island. The discovery of a dead whale washed up in BC Beach. Blah, 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 blah. Well, I showed you earlier I'd done the research expeditions along that coastline for 6 years, 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean doing species counts. There is nobody out there who's going to beat me in this narrative. First off, like, it's easy for me because I don't lie and can't have an educational program by trying to bullshit everybody. And then I actually do the work, right? I do the research expeditions, plus I dig up all the evidence and show you this bizarre consistency of emaciated animals of all species, birds included. Dead whale found after ship ties up in a naval base. So if you run into a whale and it gets on the front of the ship, it's going to just wiggle and get off the ship, right? Now this one had 2 on it, right? Or something, 2 dead whales, which meant thousands had died at sea. That thing ran through them. It was actually 2 whales. And look what they got done there. They got a boom put around it as if it's going to be pollution or something. The whole world is a bunch of lunatics, you ask me. At the shitty Navy base. Baby mink whale euthanized after getting trapped in the river, Thames River, in the fresh water. It's just a really weird phenomenon where all these whales all around the world are committing suicides in rivers. Was noticeably underweight and in a river. Noticeably underweight. Almost through this, are we? Another little tiny bit, not very long now. In our DC petition to save remaining Gulf of Mexico whales. So a petition from a lobbying group to take away the fishermen's ability to fish and to try and sort of blaming, what they're trying to do is blame all the deaths on fishermen. But what I'm able to show you was this is not the fishermen's fault. This is the ocean is broken, and it was done because of radioactive fallout has covered the ocean and destroyed the bases of the food chain, the bases of the oxygen chain, the bases of the carbon sequestration chain, also known as phytoplankton. 2 dead whales dislodged from the hull of a ship. Like the odds of striking one whale and getting it up on your bow and bringing that into port are extraordinary. Pre-Fukushima is impossible. The odds of 2 dead whales on the bow of the same ship meant to say 1,000 whales had starved to death. They were all floating around because they were a pod, and the ship went through and picked up 2 of them. That's probably the only thing that makes any sense. 2. It's a mad story. Aggressive polar bear, and I think that's the last story, almost. Aggressive polar bear holds a village under siege after walking 675 miles. They caught the bear. The bear was emaciated. The bear was lying down in people's gardens and stuff like that. It's emaciated, polar bear, and we got some crazy stories about that we're not going to get into tonight. It tried to steal a catch of fishermen and it hung out there. They finally caught the bear, and the first thing it done was ate 180 pounds of fish nonstop. It was starving to death. Polar bear that wandered 675 miles from its habitat across Russia is finally captured and is not happy. starving from a lack of food. So that picture was taken a couple of 100 kilometers away from where I am right now. That's a whale frozen into the ice. Hang on, my sock is off my heels there. From the whales, it's frozen into the ice. I mean, that's an amazing picture. It's not a good picture, but it's an amazing picture. Nuclear report warns of an apocalyptic scenario at Fukushima. It could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet. So you're not going to see those connotations for a coal plant or an oil plant or a gas plant. First off, their emissions don't cover the planet, and they don't pulse energy every second for millions of years. The only thing that can heat up the planet is nuclear, radioactive fallout. And resulting destruction will take half the planet with it. So if your coal plant breaks down, you're not going to see a headline like that. If your oil plant, your gas plant breaks down, you're not going to see a headline like that, right? If your nuclear power, stupid, moronic, idiotic nuclear power plant breaks down, you're going to see headlines like that. And this. The slower you spread coal, oil, and gas, the more effectively it produces cancer? No. The slower you spread radiation, the more effectively it produces cancers and illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. And Japan is going the very best way in the world for destroying the human race. Former official of Fukushima is a disaster of all of humanity, the entire world. It's on an international level. It's now bigger than anything we can cope with. And experts agree that many species of wildlife and fishes are endangered globally due to large releases of radioactivity from Fukushima. Nuclear engineer. I agree that Fukushima can be an extinction event. Why do you think he's saying that, Dana? Well, because radioactive fallout covers the whole planet immediately. It's sustained. It's a non-stop plume pulsing energy at the speed of light every second for millions of years. And at 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans eat irreversible lesions in the vital organs. It's going to be the same for animals and mammals and birds, except much smaller amounts. And for children, 11 becquerels a kilogram, you start to see heart problems. And you see irreversible heart damage for children, which is 50 becquerels a kilogram of gamma. And when you start including alpha and beta neutrons, it's a significant small amount will cause irreparable harm to them. Cesium-137 immediately damages the heart muscles. It's not slow acting. And think about this study to your left and the plume model to the right. The study to your left, these numbers are absurd. This was an Ottawa, Canada study. 220 million atoms per liter of rainfall of iodine-121. So that goes into thyroid glands of the insects, the birds, the mammals, the animals, the humans, and it's converted into radioactive hormones. It's insidious. The whole story is incredibly insidious. Michio Kaku, a famous physicist from the United States, human civilization may destroy itself. I mean, look at Fukushima, liquefaction of 3 reactor cores. Nobel Prize winner on NHK in Japan. The only way to preserve human life is to completely turn away from nuclear power. The only way to preserve human life. Even last year, in just a story about a social media, they mentioned nuclear power has the risk of destroying the planet, nuclear power plants. Major U.S. papers, time to quit nuclear power altogether. It threatens the very existence of human civilization as we know it. And a Tokyo legal expert, once a nuclear action occurs, everything is over. Zero prospects of ever restoring the fishing grounds. All will be lost. This is the reality of nuclear energy. Leading director in Japan, nuclear power generation is the only invention that will destroy the future of humans. Oswald, we may not be able to live in Japan someday. Think about that statement. You can't live in your own country because your power plant broke down. Japan Times columnist, the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time, the truth will come out about Fukushima. Study says Fukushima is the most serious man-made disaster in human history. Obesity rates now nearly double the Japanese average. You've seen that across Canada, the United States. Excessive weight gain after a nuclear crisis is a marker of radiation brain damage. Pneumonia cases surges in Japan, and of course we see all kinds of senior citizens dying of pneumonia, and they're calling it COVID. Unprecedented spike, 1,500 atoms of radioactive sulfur per cubic meter of air in California air. It's just another study. Another study shown tends to concentrate in the testicles, sterilizing all the species. 360 atoms of sulfur each day inhaled by Californians from Fukushima. Xenon-133, which burns a hole through your lung, and the bone seeker in Washington was 450 times above detection levels after Fukushima. 450,000 times, rather, above detection levels. These are absurd numbers, and it persisted for weeks. Just that species, those isotopes alone could have exterminated most of the insects in the whole country, which accounts for why you had millions and millions of insect-eating birds showing up dead and emaciated. No muscle mass, no fat left on their body. Nuclear fallout will engulf Taiwan. People should stay home and take off their clothes. South Korea done the same thing, by the way. South Korea sent the kids home because of radioactive fallout. And it's not just sulfur, it's not just iodine-129 or 131 or cesium-137. There's 1,000 kinds of fission products are released from those radioactive meltdowns. Animals are starving as the food chain continues to collapse. Former U.S. government official, the animal in the room is Fukushima radiation when it comes to the Pacific Ocean animal die-off, and that the government has totally failed to inform the public about the full extent, and that the media silence is not silence, is in cahoots with nuclear industries, same as the universities. It's an incredible, absurd betrayal. It's a humiliating betrayal universities and our medias have perpetrated in the last 10 years. The radioactive fallout, that model is only 20 days. Add another 10 days on, you can't see the rest of the planet. And the model is only based on venting, it's not based on the actual nuclear meltdowns. It'll be much, much more significant what you're looking at there. We had 2 donations. We had John C. donated $12 and James donated $60. James Lucid. So we're very grateful for doing that. Thank you. And that's the end of the show as far as I can tell. And so I'm going to fill up a jerry can tomorrow for the bike. We got the next couple of days off. This was a really busy week. We put out a lot of material this week, an absurd. There's probably a record amount of material. Not really. I used to do 7 days a week, right, for years. And I used to be pretty hardcore back in the day. I'm actually mellow now compared to what I used to be like. That was a 2.5 hour show. We were in the woods today for 5 hours and minus 13. But we found 3 birds today. That was amazing because we only seen 7 since November. It's an extinction event. Fukushima is an extinction event. And we got to come up with solutions. No sense pretending anymore. How did our poll do tonight? We got 48 votes. 98% of the people says the thousands of emaciated whales, birds, seals, cougars, bears, etc., 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 caused by the Fukushima radioactive fallout. And that's absolutely unequivocally the rate. I'm going to end the poll. Poll is over. Okay, so what a long day this was. As soon as I got home, I had to put the preamble up. Then I had to get in the shower and try to warm up. I still can't get warm. I shouldn't go out for more than 4 hours with low temperatures like that, because you can't get your body core temperature to come back up. It takes a long time. Yeah, those older showers, man. I was a wild man. I was wild. Like almost every video that you can find on YouTube for the first, say, 3, 4, 5 years after Fukushima, the apologist, I called out every one of them. I took the videos and chopped it up and come out and just slammed them. In the first couple of years, everybody was screeching as like a banana. And so I was so vicious that it's only 1 in 1,000 will mention the word bananas now. It's really rare to have these people mention bananas or potato chips anymore. And originally the whole planet was bombarded with those connotations, Sandra. And I went ballistic for several years on the disgusting lawyers. I should just keep doing it, I suppose. But okay, good night, everybody. Richard, Sandra, Dana Nasana, I hope you had a good night. Andrew B., which is CFINSTR. His other account was frozen or something. He couldn't use it, so now he uses that one. Timber Doodle just said he didn't notice it, but he's been unsubscribed. I get that at least once or twice every day, minimum. People tell me that they're unsubscribed. It's unbelievable, man. YouTube hates my guts. Albert, Peaceware, Richard, James Lucid gave up the Ghost Geiger. Yeah, Geiger counter gave it up, James. Battery's only going to last about 2 hours, 20 minutes. There is an insert that I could order from Amazon that goes in the battery compartment and plugs into the wall. I really should order it. It's like $25 or something. Because I'm tired of my Geiger counter camera batteries giving out on me. Because the camera won't run on external power, right? It only ran on batteries. Barks and meows. Good night, everybody. Turn that down a little bit. We might as well do a shout out. We're into it. A shout out to everybody sitting at home watching this in the background. And tonight and tomorrow, and hopefully in the future that are watching this stuff. Hugs for you and your loved ones and your friends and your families. We went to war for you every day. Thomas Mitz, I go to war every single day. This is not a game for me. To those who are not familiar with me, like this is serious work for Dana. Katja, good night, everybody. Let's get through it here. I'll just scroll up and quick shout out to any names that I managed to notice. It's good to see everybody tonight. And thank you for coming by again. I know it's a lot of material this week. Colette. Hi, Colette. I'm just looking for a thinker. Looking for any names I didn't shout out. Robert. We're almost tree fruit. We're almost up through the names here now. We'll come back down to the most recent comments. We'll shut her down. I'm just looking at the names, scrolling through the names. Looks like I've done a pretty good job, Warren. Darlene. I got a tendency to look at only first names, and sometimes there's 2 or 3 people there with the same first name, and I miss it. I apologize. This was a week of great information, because we've done all kinds of recaps this week, which wasn't planned, by the way. It just ended up going that way. We got to get the information back up there, right? Nobody else is going to do it, so I got to do it. And there's only way to do it. You can just go ahead and do it. And this was like an overload amount of work this week for me. It's overload. It's absurd amount of work. It's insane amount of work. And the week is not over. Blue Jay Outpost. Did I get everybody? Looks like I did. Yeah, maybe I'll post some of my old videos. You never know, Sandra. Okay, well, that's it for Dana. It's 12:30 at night. It's a half an hour after midnight. It's 2.5 hours past my normal bedtime. But we've moved our show up to late at night to try to accommodate everybody all the way to the West Coast. Because we're live, right? We're live. Which is the hardest way to do a video. The hardest thing, because you can't make any Freudian slips or any mistakes because you're live. You can't chop it out, see? So, it does show you the confidence that I have in the information that I do this live. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night and a great weekend. I'm going back in the woods, weather permitting, and the forecast keeps changing. I'm hoping for more snow, but we might get rain, who knows. I'm looking for birds, and we can't say yes or no unless we do the research, and this time of year it's no fun, but we still got to get it done. When I came home today, the first thing I done was took the clothes and put it in the dryer because my jacket and skidoo pants are soaking wet. What a miserable day. And a great night we got through this stuff. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody Sunday night, hopefully. Have a great one.